told her I hated her. I told her I never wanted to see her again. I told her that she had never been there, that she was always in prison. And then I walked out the door, and 13 hours later I got a call that she had taken 61 Xanax bars and had been found face first in the Christmas tree. My name is Stephanie Parr, and this is my warrior story. Well, I mean, the very first memories that I have as a little girl, is my mom was an addict. And, she was, always had people around that were high and drinking and things like that. And my mom would actually get so messed up that she would forget that I was in the house. And I would be really scared. And I would go out into a tree in the front yard, and I would climb up the tree, and I would daydream about Prince Charming and a life I was going to have someday where I was going to be rescued. My grandparents came over one day. My mom was selling drugs, and they called the police on her. And when the cops came, my grandparents took me with them, and they arrested my mom. And then my grandparents told the courts that they didn't want me either. So, I ended up going to a foster home called the Baptist Children's Home. They took me to church at that foster home, but I knew there was a God all my life, but I didn't understand what a relationship with God was. I didn't know what that meant. I guess, I was always looking for that. I had a hole, I had a space, and every face that I looked in, I was trying to find a way to fill the emptiness that was inside of me. I met this guy in high school. It's a typical story, the quarterback of the football team and, the freshman girl. And I got pregnant with my first son. And, he went into the military, and I quit school. I'd wanted to be a nurse when I was young. I wanted to do a lot of things, but, I ended up being that high school dropout. And things didn't work out with us. I ended up on my own. My son's dad left, and I ended up going with a friend of mine to work at Danny's, which is a strip bar in Memphis. And I worked there so that I could take care of my child. And the longer I stayed there, I hated the men that came in that place. All I saw was people lying about where they were at and lying to their wives, and I got this bitterness inside of me, and I swore I would never trust men. I had started, I'd tried a couple of drugs, but I had not gotten addicted yet. I drank with my friends and things like that. I didn't realize I was dancing with the demon that my mom had at the time, And when I had my daughter, and I tried really hard to be different, but I was too broken. And I ended up leaving there, and my mom ended up committing suicide on Christmas Day. And on that day, I had told her of all the days to let somebody have it, and told her I hated her. I told her I never wanted to see her again. I told her that she had never been there, that she was always in prison. And then I walked out the door, and 13 hours later I got a call that she had taken 61 Xanax bars and had been found face first in the Christmas tree. And after that, that was it. The dabbling in drugs and experiment with things turned into just full-blown addiction. Every thought I had of being a good person was gone. I was just mad at the world. I was mad at everything I didn't get to have with her, and I was going to make everybody pay for it, for that anger. When I couldn't afford the drugs anymore, I started stealing. And I wasn't even thinking about the fact that my children were watching me do this. Both of them ended up going to prison. I ended up going to prison. I spent a year and a half in MDOC after 19 felony charges of shoplifting. And while I was there, nothing changed in me. I was still just as, I was in there, I was doing drugs in the prison. I wasn't seeking God at that point. And from that point, I started wanting to die. I didn't want to be here anymore. It wasn't fun anymore. And it was all superficial. I guess that's how the devil works. He makes it feel good in the beginning, and he makes it look like it's fun. And then one day you wake up and everything you love is gone. And you've destroyed everything around you and hurt everybody. And I remember I picked up a knife, and I'd been drinking, and been high for days. And everybody was just sick of me. I'd burnt every bridge. There was nowhere left to go. And I thought I was being chased by cops. And there was nobody there. There was nobody chasing me. And I was running in the woods behind my dad's house. And I sat down, and I had my phone. And at that point, I was like, I'm fixing to kill myself. I don't want to be here anymore. And I wasn't even thinking about the fact that was the exact same thing that my mom did that I was so mad at her for. That I had beat my fist on her grave till they bled, screaming at her. And I was fixing to put my kids through the same thing. So I'm sitting in the woods, and I'm looking at my phone, and it lights up active on Holly Phillips. And, she and I had lived together, and we had been through some of our addiction together. And I had been watching her. I had been watching her for a year on Facebook. But she just kept letting everybody see how she was changing. I thought, And I thought either I'm fixing to kill myself or I'm going to call her. And I picked up the phone, I called, and she answered. And she said, what are you doing? I said, hiding in the woods from police that aren't chasing me. She probably thought I was nuts, but she said, you've got 15 minutes to get to the center. And I went. And I remember trying to do the last bit of dope I had on my way and drink the last bit of vodka I had. And I pulled in that driveway not having a clue what was going to happen next. And I walked in there. And there were just all these people hugging me and loving me. And at first I didn't know what to think about that. I'd never been shown love like that. I had carried my pain around for so long that was all I knew. And I remember being afraid of surrendering it at first because I didn't know what was underneath that. And I just got tired. And I started going to that altar and praying. And I started feeling different slowly. And we started going to Cross Point Church, and I asked God to come into my heart. I had known who God was, but I had no idea. I didn't who Jesus was. I didn't know him. I knew there was a God. I knew you were supposed to pray a prayer, and that's what I'd heard my whole life. You can come into my heart and and forgive me my sins, and that was it. That's what I'd been taught, but it's so much more than that. And at this point, I was like, God, I want to know you, forgive me, change me, because I can't live like this anymore. This is not who I want to be. Who do you want me to be? And I just started letting it go. My older son started watching me in the program, started watching God change me, and he started reaching out. My daughter came back into my life. My son ended up living through that experience, walking out of the hospital. He's been sober for 3 years, and he was baptized 3 months ago when I got out of the way. I learned who Jesus was inside of Warrior Center from a bunch of women that really loved God and loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. I learned what it was like to be a real friend and to be there for people without a motive, without an agenda, to just really love. One of the most beautiful things that you get to experience when you're working with the girls is when you're sitting across from them and there's no life in their face, and you get to watch God bring the light back. Or when you're telling them something about yourself that God walked you through, and they feel like they can talk to you because you understand where they're coming from. You know, you're not judging them. It all makes sense in that moment.
If you're ready to embark on a life-changing journey, take the first step towards renewal. Reach out to the Warrior Center today and unlock the warrior within you. Because every story of redemption starts with a choice to heal, to overcome, and to rise.